当中国来打台湾，美国会帮我们打回去吗？ This is a question that people want to know the answer to. More than whether or not Diddy is guilty. More than who's on the Epstein list. More than whether or not aliens are real. Tell me! And as of just 3 days ago, I think we finally got our answer. Because the US House of Representatives just held a hearing to discuss China's incoming invasion of Taiwan. An American general clearly told you that it's up in 2027. And actually, he said that the war had already started. And now we have a former military Navy commander claiming that Americans must fight and die with Taiwan.
It's showtime.
And when it comes to choice of words, they ain't pulling no punches, yo, because a lot was revealed. Just like how today, I'm gonna reveal my Saturday night addiction to 新手工坊草莓牛奶爆米花. Don't judge me, yo.
Nigga, you gay.
Well, you can judge me all you want, because 真的是代际多屌。你记得大概1-2个礼拜前 when the Senate was trying to push UN Resolution 2758, which had absolutely nothing to do with Taiwan, while simultaneously claiming that Taiwan was not a part of China?
Maybe?
So recently, the US Senate has been working really hard on Taiwan-related issues. Just 72 hours ago, they conducted an in-depth discussion about the upcoming war between Taiwan and China.
Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses today. I want to start with General Charles Flynn is the former commanding general of the United States Army Pacific, a 4-star command that made him the Army's senior official in the Pacific. We're grateful for his decades of service and for joining us today. Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery is the senior director at FDD's Center on Cyber and Technology Innovation. He previously, for more than 30 years in the United States Navy, including as Director of Operations at U.S. Pacific Command and as Commander of Carrier Strike Group 5. And finally, we are joined by the Honorable Kurt Campbell, who most recently was the 22nd United States Deputy Secretary of State. He currently serves as chairman and co-founder of the Asia Group.
These three individuals have very rich experience in the Indo-Pacific region and have all served in some form or capacity in senior level roles in the US government. Shit, it's possible they understand the Taiwan-China conflict better than many Taiwanese and Chinese people.
Hearing today is not just another discussion about long-term competition with China. This is about a very real, near-term threat in the narrowing window we have to prevent a catastrophic conflict in the Indo-Pacific. Sometimes this is referred to as the 2027 Davidson window, after former Indo-PACOM Commander Admiral Phil Davidson. But while Admiral Davidson did warn us about Xi Jinping's ambitions this decade, 2027 is not an American date, but a Chinese one. Xi has ordered the People's Liberation Army to be ready to take Taiwan by force by 2027. Xi's directive is backed by the largest military buildup since World War II on land, at sea, in the skies, in space, and across cyberspace. And that date, 2027, also marks the end of this Congress. That means that the 119th Congress may be the last full legislative session with a chance to alter Xi's calculus. We cannot delay. We must close critical gaps now. Weapon stockpiles, forward posture, contested logistics, cyber defenses, and Taiwan's readiness. Every decision we make on defense spending, arms deliveries, posture planning must be driven by that urgency, because deterrence delayed is deterrence denied. We have a great group today to deliver this critical message and discuss our plan and our path forward to deter the Chinese Communist Party's catastrophic ambition.
Now, before Russia invaded Ukraine, U.S. intelligence was constantly warning the Ukrainians that, hey, 代际大条哦，要准备哦. And now the U.S. is warning Taiwan about the Davidson window in 2027. 事情很大条咯.
You better be careful.
We know that Xi Jinping has ordered the PLA to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027, and that clip gave you a visual of what a prelude to a possible invasion could look like. According to a recent study, a conflict over Taiwan would be absolutely devastating for the world. It would drop global GDP by a staggering $10 trillion, or 10% in one single year. And as you can see, a war over Taiwan would be much, much worse than even the COVID pandemic at its height. Losing access to Taiwan semiconductors alone would push the U.S. into a, quote, immediate Great Depression. People would die, and our economy would crash. America, as the chairman mentioned before, America does not want a war over Taiwan. A CCP attack on Taiwan would be unacceptable for our prosperity, our security, and our values. Chairman Xi, know that America on a bipartisan basis stands for peace across the Taiwan Strait. However, we will not tolerate actions that put peace at risk.
Now, you must understand that such hearings directly influence the content of new bills these congressmen will write, and they directly affect foreign policy.
First, I want to talk about values. When I've been to Taiwan, I've been bowled over by how amazingly vibrant Taiwan's democracy is. Let me show you this scene here. This is the celebration in Taiwan after President William Lai was inaugurated last May. Now, Mr. Chair, you and I were in Taiwan right before this particular celebration, and I'm upset that we missed the party with street dancers, tiger costumes, and that big blue horse. In contrast, this was the CCP's recent celebration of Xi Jinping getting an unelected third term, setting up to be dictator for life. So here you have the contrast. On one side of the strait, you have a one-party dictatorship, and on the other side is Taiwan, a democracy doing everything it can to make sure that, in the words of one great Illinoisan, government of the people, by the people, and for the people does not perish from the earth.
Simply put, when it comes to geography, technology, and the economy, Taiwan is 重要 as fuck. But you know what's even more 重要 than that? Is that in terms of world values, Taiwan is one of the most crucial places on the entire planet. Because we are the only place on planet Earth where a democratic country is facing war with a communist country.
You're goddamn right.
Now, some of the people involved in this hearing have actually come to get to know the most important country in the world. Because let's put it simply, right here, we are America's off switch. And the questions that they are about to ask and the opinions and perspectives they are going to provide are far beyond anything that you could ever imagine. And some of you might even come to the conclusion that there are some Americans out there who understand what Taiwan needs far better than what we know or understand. And more importantly, they understand that the war has already begun. In fact, it started a long time ago. And the things that they are firing and attacking us with are far more dangerous and lethal than bullets. So, 赶快下蛋起来 because 真的是代志大条。Motherfucker.
Did they literally force Taiwan into submission by causing Taiwan to question its, the U.S.'s commitment to its defense as a result of our actions and words in the region and in places like Ukraine? Simply without even firing a bullet, as a result of our action and inaction in this particular case, could China achieve its goal?
That was in my testimony. I agree with you completely. That's what I laid out. In my mind, the most likely scenario is they're going to try this cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign, abetted and facilitated with cyber malicious activity and with military feints. And what they do is just drive the pressure up on Taiwan and try to break their societal resilience. Taiwan, the President Lai and his team feel this is the most likely scenario as well, and they have set up a task force on societal resilience to deal with it. It includes information operations, cyber, financial, communications, and energy. We've run tabletop exercises in Taiwan and with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee looking at exactly this issue. We're happy to run them with you to show you exactly what will happen in an energy-driven, cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign. You're exactly right.
If you saw your fellow Taiwanese shot by a gun on the battlefield, you'd be inclined to help them out. But if your fellow Taiwanese is shot by another more sophisticated weapon, maybe instead you'd scold and shame them and even attack them yourself. And this weapon is what we call misinformation.
If you want to read Chinese language products in the United States, 92 to 95% come from the Chinese Communist Party. This is a real problem for us. We need to absolutely push back. I do feel like we need some of our tools back, like Radio Free Asia and others, push back in to get the truth out, the truth about American exceptionalism, the truth about what we're pushing forward, the truth about our allies and partners in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. So you're absolutely right, sir. We are competing with a monolith in China, and we're going to need every tool possible.
Could I tell you a story?
So yeah.
This is happening not just in the United States, it's happening in other countries. Land is purchased near critical infrastructure. On that land, there's a Chinese company where the majority shareholders own a telecommunications company. On that land, they put towers. From those towers, they disseminate information. They go and purchase a media company, and then they buy bot farms that spread that disinformation and misinformation throughout all these countries. We know what's going on. We're watching it. We don't have enough capacity to go into each of these countries and counter it. But it is so pervasive out there in each one of these countries, it is damaging to the credibility of the United States.
Now, recently, Trump said China and the U.S. business market can have unification and peace. And almost all mainstream Taiwanese media wrote that Trump wants Taiwan and China to peacefully unify.
What kind of shit is that?
This type of misinformation is a lot cheaper than bullets, but way more lethal.
I'll begin with a story. It starts with a pineapple in Taiwan. 90% of Taiwan's pineapples go to mainland China. When mainland China decided they wanted to change prefecture races in local elections, they sent out a massive dictate that they would be embargoing local farmers in Taiwan. I'm from a farm state in Iowa. That makes a real impact. As a result, the Chinese effectively turned multiple prefectures across Taiwan against their own government in Taipei by electing communist-leaning local leaders. Admiral Montgomery, you're a senior director at the Center for Cyber and Technology. You've spoken about CCP propaganda, false flag operations in the digital domain. This is an opportunity for the CCP to change leadership in Taiwan, like Taiwanese pineapple, without a shot being fired. Do you believe the CCP is capable of setting off a false flag invasion in Taiwan itself?
I do, sir. I do think that, I don't know that they could overthrow the government with it, but I do believe that information operations and deception run by the Chinese Communist Party will absolutely weaken Taiwan's societal resilience. When you combine it with the other tools, cyber attacks, economic pressures, energy pressures, cutting off communications with magical anchor drops on cables, when you combine that all together, it's that cohesive, comprehensive attack that breaks societal resilience. So I think it'll take more than just the one thing, but everything contributes to a weakened Taiwan.
Taiwan has even elected CCP officials. Bruh, Taiwan is already a battlefield. The CCP is using weapons way more efficient than bullets and missiles, and the dangerous places for Taiwan are not just from CCP attacks, but also from Taiwan's own internal weaknesses.
Of their three sectors, telecommunications, energy, and finance, I think the one that's most vulnerable and will break their societal resilience is energy. They get one LNG ship a day. Once they've missed 5 LNG ships, they're going to be out of LNG, right? That's a problem. That's liquid natural gas. From my point of view, they need to bring the 2 nuclear power plants back. They're shutting down their final one today, in fact. They need to bring them back. That'll bring back about 8 or 9% of their grid. And then we need to figure out how to protect LNG. That means we need to set up, as I mentioned earlier, convoy schemes, reflagging schemes. We need to work with Australia, and we need to work with Alaska, because right now they're heavily dependent on Qatar. Despite whether we get a 747 for them or not, I think in the middle of a crisis, China's going to turn to Qatar and say, we buy 15 times more LNG than Taiwan. You need to stop delivering to one country. And Qatar is going to choose very quickly to stop delivering to Taiwan. So we need to get them secure in LNG.
Now, although nuclear power plants are more important to Taiwan and international law prohibits attacking such plants during war, Taiwan is not internationally recognized. So, would international law apply to Taiwan here? Would the CCP follow international law and its conventions when invading? Could you imagine the terrible scenario of Taiwan simultaneously dealing with invaders and a nuclear leak during war?
Complete and total disaster.
While these air crossings happen almost daily, making invasion seem possible, a more likely scenario is a CCP-led blockade of the island. And here's how it could unfold. Step 1, the PLA calls snap exercises like those after Speaker Pelosi's 2022 visit. You see all these ships surrounding the island. Step 2, instead of leaving, PLA warships stay in place, and then Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels fill the gaps, creating a de facto blockade, which of course is an act of war. Step 3, the real test comes when imports like corn and soy from Illinois, Michigan, and of course South Dakota try to reach Taiwan, as you see here, but they are stopped by the CCP. In that moment, we are on the brink of war. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were famously, quote unquote, eyeball to eyeball with the Soviets, and the Soviets blinked first. But we don't want to get to that point where we need to be eyeball to eyeball with the CCP. So General Flynn, you'd agree with me that one way Taiwan can deter a blockade is by stockpiling, for instance, corn, soy, natural gas, and so forth, right?
Yes, Ranking Member, absolutely.
5天，你确定吗？因为这个数字跟我查的差很多诶。But let's play devil's advocate and assume that our natural gas reserves can only last us 5 days, facing a Chinese blockade just 2 years later. If that is actually the case, then how many natural gas facilities should we increase by?
I do want to say also, Admiral Paparo, I'm sure you know, Commander U.S. Indo-PACOM gave China's armed forces last month high marks for their ability to prevent the U.S. forces from achieving air superiority in the first island chain. Do you think that's true?
Yes, I do.
Ouch.
Hey, can I add to
Yes,
that? I think that's true for the first 2 weeks. Our goal, and maybe only 1 week, our goal, our plan is to roll back Chinese air power. If we can't roll it back in under 7 to 10 days, in my mind, the ground forces that Charlie's been talking about, the Taiwan ground forces, will get overrun by a Chinese lodgment. So I think we really have to get it back pretty rapidly.
We have to get it back, but the challenge that we're talking about is getting it back is at what cost?
We have work to do.
So, according to them, natural gas reserves need to be increased by Sanbei. By this point, you might have figured out that the US is trying to figure out how to retake Taiwan's air superiority in just 7 days. So, does that mean that the US military will actually deploy if China invades? Will we see Tom Cruise flying by with the F-18? Well, if you ask me, I think the answer is most definitely yes. If you keep watching, you're going to discover that this is more deep and more dramatic than you could ever imagine. Because this could involve more than just the US military. It could involve an entire Asian military alliance, aptly named the Indo-Pacific Military Alliance, Asia's NATO. Woo, 事情很大条咯。来第二个 ，Mother。
Sir, if I could add one cost-free idea, we need to begin practicing escorts and reflaggings with Taiwan. The other, you didn't mention it, but LNG, liquid natural gas, is the real, I think that's the first thing that's going to tighten them up during this. And we need to, ahead of the event, do reflagging and convoy escorts with the Taiwan Navy, practicing with LNGs, and even try to pull the Japanese into that as well, who are equally vulnerable to this. To me, that's a good cost-free way of signaling to China, we're not going to let this happen.
Now, reflagging means that Taiwanese and Japanese commercial ships or supply vessels will all be changed to US flags, protected by the US military to supply Taiwan. So, in Asia, if any ship flying a US flag is attacked, it's the equivalent of declaring war on America. Now, to me, this is no longer a question of whether or not the US should help Taiwan.
We must establish a distributed, resilient land power posture across the first and second island chains, backed by rapid access agreements, robust joint exercises, and pre-positioned equipment that accelerates our response times. This is not just a U.S. Army issue. Our most capable partners in Asia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, India, and Indonesia, all field large and capable armies. If we integrate them, if we train and network them to operate with U.S. forces, we create an Indo-Pacific land power network that multiplies deterrence tenfold.
The Indo-Pacific Land Power Network. Subtly put, this is just the Indo-Pacific Military Alliance, Asia's own version of NATO. And when all Asian vessels fly US flags, the Indo-Pacific Military Alliance is completely normal, because you can't have the US protecting you without you deploying troops, right?
You're goddamn right.
Now, I wonder if Trump will include this in his tariff negotiations.
I do think that the real deterrence is us and Taiwan becoming more integrated. I don't share General Flynn's optimism about Japan, Philippines, Australia actually contributing. They may give us access during combat. I'm not sure they can contribute. The one country I know will contribute to the defense of Taiwan is Taiwan. And currently, our military coordination our military interoperability is down at the deconflicted level, the lowest level. We have to raise it to coordinated, integrated, and eventually unified. And this normally takes 10 to 15 years.
That's
we need
very
to
helpful.
do this in the next 2 to 3.
And of course, just like NATO, with America involved, no one wants to pay for their own defense. Some don't even believe the Indo-Pacific Military Alliance can succeed. But if Taiwan and the US military unify, this sounds pretty good to me. Hey, 台湾人，你要不要成为美国的第51个州? Are you willing to serve for 3 years to let the Taiwanese military become part of the American military?
And alongside that foreign military sales, the U.S. should maximize its military assistance to Taiwan through FMF, Presidential Drawdown of Authorities, and Congress's new Taiwan Security Cooperation Initiative. Taiwan is too small to handle the Chinese challenge alone. We should also pre-position munitions in Taiwan by establishing a stockpile program similar to the ones that we have in Israel and Korea. And we should expand our joint training and exercise programs. And I'd start by growing the joint training team developed by General Flynn out to about 1,000 people.
Just like Israel and South Korea's reserve stockpiles, he's talking about war reserve stockpiles for allies. Korea's abbreviation is WRSA-K. Israel's is WRSA-I. WRSA is used for Allied and U.S. military operations. If the Taiwanese military is unified with the U.S. military, using the same military reserves is quite normal. 对嘛?
Deterrence is not just a capability or capacity to do something, but a belief that you're willing to do it. So I think what's really critical for us is a lot of the recommendations all three of us have pushed out here are about either building capacity to do something and prevent a Chinese coercive action, and then a credible belief that you're going to do it. It's been brought up here, our withdrawal from Afghanistan, our how we've supported Ukraine. Both those factors kind of make allies nervous about our commitment. They should make Taiwan nervous. So our job, Congress's job, is to be out there aggressively pushing legislation that makes the proper investments, both in weapon systems, munitions, but also diplomatically and economically, to signal to Taiwan that we're willing to fight and die with them. That's a tough signal, but it's one I believe in. I think it's one General Flynn believes in, and we spend our careers pushing. So I do believe we can do this deterrence, sir.
Fight and die with them. This is the most supportive statement about Taiwan that I've heard from a former U.S. official. And this guy is Mark Montgomery, a retired Navy Rear Admiral, former commander of Career Strike Group 5. Mark, you are welcome here in Taiwan, brother. And if you have some time, maybe stop by our Haltiza podcast.
Look, I understand what we're doing, trying to balance the books on some of our trade engagements. Frankly, I'm more focused on that relationship with Beijing than I am going around and hitting some of our allies really hard. I would be much more focused on seeing what we can do in partnership with them, infrastructure, technology, military. I'm more ambitious and more bullish about what we can do together. I think we've turned a corner with many of these countries who see the threats on the horizon, and frankly, they want to be with the United States, and I want us to be up to that challenge.
Translation, Trump, shut up and just make money.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
台湾朋友，我跟你讲起来吼，在美国真的有蛮多人支持台湾 like the former 5th Fleet Commander Mark Montgomery. Now, word on the street is that a lot of House Republicans are really unhappy with Trump's ability to talk bullshit. And I think there's gonna be even more Republicans joining in on an impeachment inquiry than last time.
No, you're right.
讲直接一点, Trump is tough on China, which is great for us, but he's also oftentimes full of shit. So I'd say err on the safe side. Whenever you hear Trump say anything about Taiwan, just treat it as stand-up comedy, or at best, fake news.
And General Flynn, I think you open the window here that this cannot be America alone. This has to be an integrated operation, both what we do on the ground, in our communications, also in our kinetic response here, using a diversity of weapon systems. Very briefly, I want to thank the Secretary for being here. We've led on the 6 Assurances to Taiwan Act. I'm leading the Fortifying U.S. Markets from Chinese Military Aggression Act. We have seen the shortcomings of the foreign military sales, just its scope there. Could there be an opportunity to increase partnership in the defense of Taiwan by expanding our direct commercial sales, our licensing for dual technologies, to facilitate a rapid transfer of critical needs to Taiwan from both us and our allies?
I believe that is entirely what's possible, and I think with your leadership from the committee, it helps push the executive branch. One of the things that both my colleagues have underscored is that the limitations bureaucratically that have existed for decades that make it difficult to fulfill some of our defense commitments to Taiwan, slowly but surely those are being pushed away in favor of greater greater efficiencies and the like. I think it is, in fact, the case that the executive branch responds best when it hears from this committee on these issues. And I just, again, thank you for your guys' commitment and service on these issues.
I want to thank both my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, very focused not just on national security, but on pragmatic ways that we can get ahead of this problem so we don't end up in these kinetic situations that this team has so articulately displayed in a situation where we do not want to be in if we can prevent it on the front end.
Now, everything you see today is just what the witnesses proposed, but it has not yet become official U.S. policy. These witnesses have enormous influence. They are experts, and the policies and bills proposed by congressmen will reference their testimonies. Therefore, I think we can see that Taiwan and the U.S. are going to become increasingly interconnected.
Tight, yeah!
我要跟你讲，这个 hearing 其实是2个小时的长度，我只把18分钟挖出来给你听，但其实全部真的很有料诶。所以如果你想看多一点，留言 down below, son. And by the way, make sure you get some 爆米花 like, comment, subscribe, and 把这个影片分享给你朋友看。And I will see you on the flip side. Let's go. Oh!